And welcome everyone to Simplify Revit Model Management with Ideate BIMLink. My name is Richard Taylor with Ideate Software, and I have I can't believe it now, 17 years of experience with Revit. I was fortunate enough to be one of the original employees at Revit Technology back when it started in 2000, before the Autodesk acquisition in 2002. So I've worked at Autodesk for a number of years and various other software design firms as well as architecture firms, both large and small. So thank you very much for having me on the presentation today. Now you see here that we have Ideate Software has 4 solutions that we developed specifically for Revit: Ideate BIMLink, Ideate Explorer, Ideate Sticky, and Ideate Apps. And as Harry mentioned, we've actually already presented several of the other solutions in previous webinars. So I'd encourage you to go to the Microsol Resources website and review those. But today we're focusing on Ideate BIMLink and simplifying your Revit model management with Ideate BIMLink. So very quickly, Ideate Software is headquartered in San Francisco in the United States, but we have a team in the UK, in Washington State, Oregon, New Jersey, and myself, I am local to Microsol Resources in Massachusetts, just outside of Boston. So, but we have customers around the world in over 50 countries. Basically, I always say wherever there is Revit, there is the need for Ideate Software. So our agenda today is to give you an overview of Ideate BIMLink. So I'm going to do that with kind of an introduction video where I'm going to talk about how we export information from the Revit model, and we look at basically parameters or properties in Revit, instance versus type. Then I'm going to show some sort of live examples of a room schedule, doing some Excel modifications with formulas, and then being able to actually place new elements like placeholder rooms or placeholder sheets. Then we'll go through a quantity takeoff. We'll show you how we can manage family names and really just the ability to rename and renumber almost anything with Ideate BIMLink. And then I'll do a kind of little information on a project-wide spell check, and then a little video on managing elevation names. And then of course, as Harry mentioned, any question and answers you have along the way, we'll try to answer those the best we can. So the first thing is an Ideate BIMLink overview. So I think the best thing is to talk about this little presentation here. And we basically say to sort of divide our type versus instance parameters. So I'll get into that in a little bit. So you start Ideate BIMLink through the dialog here, and so we have available over 300 different link definitions. Think of these as like basically a template, if you will. Very similar to like if you're creating schedules. So you can go through and you can actually have all these sample links that have all of the properties already predefined. But you can add properties, you can remove properties. You can also go to any specific category and create a new link. And you'll see here you have the ability to create a new link definition. You can use a sample link, or you can pull parameter data from the schedule. And that's what I'm going to do here, and I'm going to base it on the instance. So when we look at this dialog, it's very similar to a Revit schedule, where you have available properties on the left and the linked properties that you'd like to send out to Excel on the right. So you have the ability to sort of filter based on project parameters, based on family parameters, system parameters, and you can choose exactly what data you would like to manipulate within Excel. So once I have the properties or the data, then I export that information to Excel. I open up the Excel file, and so here's what we're seeing is along the top, the column headers basically are the properties, and the information then can be manipulated. So think about in the background there, I've actually filled out some information in Excel, and now I'm importing that, and down below you're going to see that it's going to show you the Revit properties that have changed, and it's going to give you up above, basically again, the areas in yellow that have been modified. So you can choose to cancel or import at this time. So I want you to notice that there with the voltage and the alternate manufacturers, those were instance properties that were able to be modified and changed and filled out on the schedule. Now what we're going to do is we're going to basically convert the link from a instance-based link definition to a type-based link definition. And now there are other properties, as you see here, the lamp wattage, the lamp catalog number, the diffusing material, trim color, and other things that are based on the type, right? And so we can export to the same exact Excel worksheet, but you can actually create multiple tabs or multiple workbooks basically within that worksheet. Then you can fill out the information and import that information. So now when we look at our lighting fixture schedule, right, down below, we see that both the instance as well as the type based parameters have been filled out. And I'm going to go into this with much more detail, but I kind of like showing this little overview of how you access Ideate BIMLink and how you would export information to Excel. So again, kind of an overview of Ideate BIMLink is basically that first check is what we just saw there. You can actually edit parameters in schedules. So any parameter that you can think of that is schedulable. And then also, if you look at that third bullet item, you can manage parameters that just don't appear in schedules. And I'm sure many of us have had that situation where, you know, you're basically maybe creating a schedule and you know you have some properties, but they're just not available to be checked or put into the schedule. You know, certainly things like the wall height, offset elevation, sometimes the design option information, you know, scope box, revision information. So we're trying to expose all of that to give you that ability to modify it in Excel. And then I'm also going to show you some examples of creating things. We can create, you know, basically, you know, areas, schedule keys, masses, generic models, placeholder rooms, sheets, and spaces. And it's very easy to do that within the Excel schedule. So as an example, you might want to create your entire sheet list and then import that into Revit and then be able to, you know, place your sheets and title blocks based on that format that someone else has filled out in Excel. And then we're giving you access to, as I mentioned before, all of the data. So we're going to be able to look at linked files. Now, when it comes to modification, you know, you're only able to modify elements in your main file, because that's sort of like a Revit key in the sense of, you know, it's you can only modify things within your master model. However, if you wanted to, as an example, go and do a quality control link of all of the work sets that are used across 15 linked models, you could certainly do that. Or maybe you'd like to look at all of the families that are used or door types. So when it comes to quality control, that linked file support is really important. You know, we provide both the 2D and the 3D information, so not only model geometry, but you can look at lines or annotations or tags, dimensions, those types of things. And then we're giving you access to design options and phase data. So I'm going to show you basically examples of many of these things. And then I kind of skipped over that second one, that rename families and types, but I have an example of that too, where we're going to be able to rename information very easily. So basically, why do we do all this, right? Why is there Ideate BIMLink, and why are we working in Excel? Well, the main reason is that it's just easier to edit the information in a mass quantity type of way in Excel. Excel allows you to select multiple items and change them, copy and paste, things that just cannot be done within a Revit schedule. You can also start to apply formulas to information where you can concatenate or combine different columns or fields, and so I've got examples of that too. You can, you know, spell check, and actually most people know at least a little bit about Excel, and so there's really no training required. And in fact, a lot of times on a project team, there is someone who's very adept and familiar with Excel, and so you can really extend the Revit project team by having this maybe another person that's just an Excel expert doing a lot of these changes and manipulations and modifications, and then someone who's the Revit designer or project manager importing that data into Excel, or I'm sorry, into Revit. So as I said, I'd like to kind of show some of these things that I just talked about, and I'm going to do that as a room schedule export. So that's, I thought would give you an idea of maybe, multiple examples of some of these concepts that I've talked about today. So I'm going to switch over here to Excel. Well, I will switch to Excel in a moment, but actually I'm going to start with Revit. And so this is Revit 2017.2. It's the latest Revit release from Autodesk that was released about, I think maybe about a month ago. So you may have noticed in that introductory video, the Ideate software tools were accessed through the Add-ins tab. And so that is true if you have 2014 of Revit, 2015, 2016. But in 2017, we've introduced our own tab called Ideate Software because we're developing quite a few new applications, and we thought that as we develop new tools, we didn't want to sort of clog up the add-ins tab. We wanted to have our own software tab. So if you, depending on the version that you're working with, you may see a little bit of difference there. So again, I'm in 2017. I would come over here and I would start Ideate BIMLink. You'll also see that I have the tools on the Quick Access toolbar as well. And let me just close that. And so I've added all of the Ideate software tools. And what you can do is just right-click and say Add to Quick Access toolbar. And so now I have the ability to just come over here and select on BIMLink. So again, this is the main interface. And you saw that you can load samples, and as I said, there are over 300 samples that we have available, and we've organized them into logical categories, architectural links or samples, MEP, electrical, mechanical, plumbing, project standards, and quality control. And the quality control, those are links that, again, you might want to see, like, for instance, here's a good one, all the phasing that's used across, multiple categories, what kind of views have been used in your projects, and so forth. So that's a good place to really start. And in fact, when I click on each one of these, there's a little description here basically that shows, review and edit the phase, create state of the model, here's room numbering, sends room finish data to interiors department for review. So we've tried to kind of give a quick overview of what the description is. So I'd always like to, comment that that's a good place to start with all these links, right? Or what you can do is what I'm going to do right now is you can go from a schedule. So when I select from schedule, it's going to give you all of the Revit schedules that are currently in this project. So I'm going to come down here to the room schedule. And room schedules by default, or I should say most schedules by default, are listed by instance, meaning that we're looking at each individual instance or location of a room, right? So when I say next, what Ideate BIMLink is going to do is look at the room schedule that was defined, and here are the properties. So they were looking, whoever created this schedule was interested in the room number, the room name, the area of the room, and the room type, whether it was a classroom or, let's say, a multi-purpose room or something. But they were also interested in these finishes. And maybe if I'm doing a shift select, I can highlight all 4 of those and say, you know what, I don't really care about sending those out to Excel, those finishes. But I might want to send out the department as an example. So what I can do is double-click on that, right? And I can do 2 things. I can double-click, or I can say add or remove. But what I can also do is these are all of the available properties in rooms, as you see here. All of the information that I can extract from rooms. But what I can also do is look at the coordinates, the level, the phase, the project information, or even the link information. For instance, the RVT link name. You'll see that there's link name, link type, work sets, and so forth. In this particular file, there's only the main file. I don't have other Revit linked files, so it's kind of a moot point. But I might want to actually grab some level information. So let's say that I want to come over here and grab the level name, and I'll go ahead and show you the add. So now what I've done here, and you see there's a preview down below that shows me, okay, the room number, the room name, the area, and so forth. Now, I can also filter and sort. What I'm doing is I'm sorting on the room number from the highest to lowest, but you can see I can build multiple sort fields. I can also filter out information. In this case, all of them are on the first floor, but I'll just show you here. Like once I have a particular property, like I showed you the level name, I can say where the level name contains the word first. And I want to make sure that that is a filter. And if I have multiple filters, I can do an or condition. So if I say elements must pass all filters, that's the way it works in Revit schedules. There's only the and. It basically has to pass all of these conditions. But if I say uncheck that, it's actually an or condition. It means either the level name contains first or something else, or I'll show you, or the room number is contains let's say 1, or let's say 100. You know, that should actually get down to quite, so it's or, right? So it says, hey, if the level is the first level, or if the room is 100, show me. But watch what happens now when I say and. It says, oh, you have to have, the level name has to actually be the first level, and it has to match this 100. So in fact, down below, you see we only have one piece of information. Well, in this particular case, you know, I don't want that. So I'm actually going to remove that number sort. But just to show you how you can create these filters very easily. Okay, so back in our properties here, I've chosen the room number, name, area, department, and level name. Okay? So now I'm saying, all right, that's what I want to extract to Excel. I'm going to say done, and I'm going to say export. And so I'm going to select a room schedule that I actually already created earlier, which is fine. So when I select a schedule that's already there, it's asking me, when I say save, do I want to overwrite the existing worksheet? And so you always have the choice of, you know, you can select another spreadsheet or you can overwrite. In this case, I'm going to overwrite the data. And I'm going to say open up the file. So now what it does is it opens up Excel, and here's the information that I can sort of play around with or manipulate. And you'll also notice that in this schedule, because it was already created, I actually previously did the room types. And I said, oh, here are the different room types that are available to me, right? So I can make some manipulations. So you can actually have multiple tabs along the bottom here. Again, you could maybe create room schedules, room schedule types, maybe views, or whatever makes sense. Basically, you might want to have multiple tabs or pieces of information in the same Excel spreadsheet. So what we're looking at here is, so I come back over the top here, we've got our room number, and you may notice, if you're very astute, that some of the room numbers skip. And so maybe I want this to be sequential. So a little Excel trip is I can't say the word. A little Excel trick, excuse me, is I can actually highlight both of these, not like number 100 and 101, and I can grab on that little green area there, and I can then say, you know what, take that 101, that sequence, 100, 101, and I want to apply that and do it sequentially. So now what it does is it updates all those rooms in a nice sequence. Okay, so then another thing I look at is, oh, all these names here, all these room names are lowercase, and maybe I have an office standard where they all need to be uppercase. So how do I do that? Well, that's a really nice little formula that we have in Excel. So I'm going to come over here to the right. It doesn't matter, you know, where, but over to the right, I'm going to say equals, which starts our formula, and there's a little formula in Excel called upper, for uppercase, and I'm going to say, oh, start with C2. That's the column, right? So then it actually says, oh, that's multi-purpose space. And if I, again, grab on that formula, the formula itself, right, Excel is smart enough that if I grab that little corner, right, and let's say drop it all the way down to all the rooms, it's now going to apply that little formula to all the rooms. So then I say, all right, now I've got that information. I'm going to copy, and I'm going to place it back over here. But I'm not going to copy the formula, because you'll see that it'll kind of get a circular reference. What I want to do is paste the values. So the values that I created from that formula, I want to paste back in this column C. So now they're all uppercase. Then you'll also see that I have room types here, and I have a drop-down list. So it's created that automatically of the available sort of fields, if you will. So for instance, I don't have to worry about typing something or misspelling something, because in Revit there was a finite list of room types available. And so I said generate these lists. So when you think about like view templates, there's a finite list of view templates within your project, and you want to assign, for instance, view templates to a view. You know, this is a great way to do it, is you create a drop-down list. So for instance, you know, maybe I want this to be hallway, and I'm going to say there's a whole bunch of these that haven't been filled out, so I'll just say that this is common space. And then of course I can do a Control-C, and this is where you can't do these kinds of things in a Revit schedule, is take all of this information and say paste, right? So that was really easy to do that. The same way if I come up here to, you know, the department, maybe I wanted a new department called admin, and I'm going to take that information, I'm going to say Control-C, and, you know, just add that down here and do the same thing, maybe fill out some of these things. Okay, so what I've done there is I've changed the upper, you know, did a real nice quick little formula where I changed the lowercase to uppercase. I've changed some of the room types and the department name. And then I said I want to go over here and actually create a new item. So we're going to make some rows here. And so maybe I want this to be, I'm going to call it Town Hall Space. And we're going to give it a room number of, let's say, I don't know, 180 or something. And then we're going to say that, oh, it's common space, so I'm going to say Control-C, we'll Control-V. And maybe, you know, it's occupancy, so again, Control-C, and we'll Control-V. So basically, I'm telling it what I want. Now, I can't fill out the area because it's actually going to be an unplaced room. And in fact, that's a good way. When you look at this, the items that are in gray are not editable. So for instance, I couldn't edit like change first floor, the name of it, to second floor. Now, in a different link, if I was like sending out the names of the floors, then I would be able to edit that information. But because here we're only referencing the information, meaning that we're referencing the level name of the room, and this room hasn't been placed, you know, I'm not able to edit this information. But the key thing here is all of these are Revit element ID numbers over to the left here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to say the word new. So I'm telling BIMLink that there's not a Revit element ID. This is going to be a new item, a new room that is going to have room number 180. It's going to be the town hall space. It's going to be common space and occupancy. So now I've done all this. I've changed this information, and I'm going to save it in Excel. Come back over here to Revit, and now we're going to select Import. So Import, I select the room schedule I just was editing or modifying. That's why it was important to save it so we get the latest information. I'm going to open this, and notice that because there are multiple worksheets, Ideate BIMLink is telling me, well, do you want to import the room type schedule or do you want to import the room schedules? And in this case, the tab that we were modifying was the room schedule. So I'm going to select OK. And so it gives me a great preview up above of all the information that's changed, right? And it actually tells me that, hey, there was a new unplaced room that was created and all these other things are changed down below. So I have the ability to either import or to cancel. In this case, I'm going to import. And I'm going to close, and I'm going to go to my first floor equipment and furniture plan. So when I zoom up, notice that every single room has now been created in uppercase. So, you know, it was easy to change all that information. Also, let's come over here to this, I don't know, this space here. Let's delete this room. And let's come over here to architecture and select room. And I know I haven't saved it. And we're going to do place room. But we're not going to place a new room, right? We're going to place a room that's right here. Now, because I just deleted, right, multi-purpose space, that's available to me. But now I want to place town hall space. That was that new room, the placeholder room we created in Excel. Now when I say I'm placing this town hall space, right, and now let's look at that information. Well, it automatically assigned it to the first floor because that's where it is. It says that it was common space. It was room number 180. The department we said was occupancy. So again, anything that you want to sort of populate, or you definitely could say you want to fill out the ceiling, wall, floor finishes. Those were things that remember I said, oh, I don't want that to be exported to Excel, but it certainly could be. So again, it's a great way to create these items as well in Excel and be able to import and modify them. And like I said, you saw that I was able to take all the information, all the rooms, and now they're uppercase, and the rooms themselves, if I did change like the room type edit, this was classroom. And by the way, that reminds me, if I go back to BIMLink, you might have been very curious and said, well, how did he create those drop-down lists? So if I go to the properties of the room schedule, one of the properties here was, if I went to the link, there was export with drop-down values. So if there is a finite list of elements in Revit, like I said, in the case of room types or view templates is another good example, or any time where there's kind of a list that you're picking from, you can export with these drop-down values. Also, you'll notice that there's another check here that you can include linked elements. Again, as I mentioned, this particular file did not have any linked element or any linked Revit files, so I didn't check that. But by doing that, it will actually include information from the linked file, again, for review purposes only. We're not able to modify those elements like you just saw that I was able to do in this master file. I would have to go into each one of those files to modify or manipulate the information. Okay. So I think that was a good, hopefully that was a good kind of example of, showing some ideas of how you could export information and manipulate it with formulas within Excel, and then import that information to update to the Revit model. Now another feature or use of Ideate BIMLink is allowing to do a QTO, or construction or a quantity takeoff, basically, where we can extract information based on area, length, volume, and the example that I just showed you, or when I was going through, I selected rooms, right? That was a room category. But we can do multi-category, and we can actually export the wall height, the phase, the design options, as I mentioned here. So let's go ahead and take a look at this. And actually, this is also showing that we have multiple version support. So this happens to be in Revit 2015. Now, all of our software solutions have in-product help. And so we take pride in the details that we have in our help menu. So in the help menu for Ideate BIMLink, there's information on how would you do and export a quantity takeoff. And in fact, we're providing a sample, or a template, if you will, of a spreadsheet that has a little macro in it, basically, that allows you to update the information. So in this case, here's this macro, right, or this Excel spreadsheet. And the macro, I'm sorry, is right here in the Summary tab. So what we're going to do is we're going to copy that. That's when you install Ideate BIMLink, you have that in the directory. We're going to copy it over to our project folder, and then we're going to extract our QTO, our construction quantity takeoff. So now in this project, which is a sample project from Autodesk, it's their hospital sample, I can select all the categories that I want. So it's going to send out all the information, but I can say, well, I don't want structural elements, or maybe I don't want MEP elements, or you can control that. So I'm going to overwrite the existing data, and basically we're kind of calling this the raw data. So it extracts all of the elements within that model, that hospital project. It extracts the information about it in the sense of the quantities, but also the links, as you see here. Here's all the air terminals as an example. Here's all the supply diffusers. All right, all that information. But then we also include this Summary tab, which is a pivot table. And so what you can do is refresh the pivot table, and it's going to look at that raw data tab, which is the construction underbar QTO, and it's going to update the information so that you can continue to basically export the information to the construction QTO tab or worksheet and then constantly update the summary. You can actually set it so that you don't have to actually hit refresh every time. The pivot table can be set so that it's always going to on new information basically update. So you see here, it's actually, we have all of the sum of areas, the sum of volumes, and it's a nice sort of format in Excel. And this is a good example of how people are using Ideate BIMLink in the sense of they're extracting data from Revit, they're putting it into Excel, and many times they're just sort of massaging the data, or they're formatting it in a way that makes sense. So in this case, it's easy to see and easy to format with an Excel pivot table these nice little pieces of summary information. And then, this could be used in a report, or you might want to actually use one of our other products called Ideate Sticky to be able to take this table and place it back into the Revit project. So another example of how Ideate BIMLink can be used is to manage your data in the sense of you've got hundreds of different families, you've got all kinds of things in Revit with different names, and then you want to be able to maybe use some of the power of Excel to rename things easily and with kind of a mass quantity. Like, how would you do that? Like in this case, over to the left you have these families. You've got arrow, break line 2. Over to the right, you want everything to have like a CSI number and before it, like 0100, 0400, 0500. So how would you do that in a much easy way without having to rename each individual item? Well, again, you can use Ideate BIMLink, and so here we're selecting BIMLink, and we have a again a sample link. So we're going to go to our load samples here, and you'll see that we have one that allows you to rename different families or standards. So in this case, you see here we have project standards, rename types. You can rename all the families within a project. So all you have to do is basically load up that link, decide which particular categories you'd like to extract. Again, here's the thing I showed you with being able to sort by the category, the family name, the type name, and then I'd like to look at just the category, family, and type, and then I'll export that out. So again, I'll save that off to an Excel spreadsheet, and I'll open that file. And then we're going to use some magic basically in Excel. I call it magic, but it's pretty cool. The fact that you can use these formulas basically, just like I did with the upper to create a formula. You can create a formula that sort of concatenates, or you can add a suffix or add a prefix. So again, in the table in Excel, we're going to sort by the family name. And what we're going to do is, in this case, what we're doing is sorting on the cell color, because there are some families that, in this case, we're not able to rename. So because they're system families, so we're going to go ahead and say we're going to remove those off of our spreadsheet for right now. But you could actually filter them first within BIMLink as well. So there's always several choices here. But now we have the family and type name that we're going to rename. So what we're doing is we're now saying, okay, this is a CSI section, and we want to have that the column E be the preface, right? So what we're saying is now we're saying, with a little formula, take the information in column E and add it to column C, which is the name. So now we have that 064100 underbar and then the name of the family. And then we're going to do the same thing with a couple of other spec sections. So again, just like you saw me do earlier, I'm going to take the resulting of the formula, right, the results, and copy it back. So again, here's a new spec section. I'm going to basically concatenate, or say I want those two, like column E and the name in column C, to be put together, and then pull down the formula for all of those doors. And then we're going to basically copy the information and copy the values over to column C. So now those have new, the appended CSI sections before them. So we save the spreadsheet, right? And now I'm going to import the information in. So when I say that there's my project standards, it's going to go through and import that information. And so we'll be able to see when we select that, we can always review the information first with BIMLink, and that's a great value. And then say, all right, we want to close the import, and now you see over the project browser all the casework and the information updated, right? So that you can actually now export this information. This is a Revit command. So if you wanted to like resave all the families out with their new family names, you could do that very easily. So there was an example of using Ideate BIMLink to really unify your project standards by quickly renaming families, or just really, like I said, just renaming about anything. Now, I figured that I wouldn't probably have time to actually show the spell check, so I just have a slide here. What you can do is you can, very similar to what you saw with some of the examples earlier, you can send out all the text in the Revit project. So not just, the spell check in Revit works basically view by view. So you pick the view you're on, you say run a spell check. But with Ideate BIMLink, you can actually send out all the text to Excel, and then you can use Excel's spell check. And you can actually convert words very easily. You can check, or you can ignore like uppercase or lowercase words. You can add to dictionary. So it is much more robust than the default spell check within Revit. So now I'm going to jump over here. This is very similar to the sort of renaming standards, but I really like to show this because it kind of pulls all the things we talked about today together. Because it talks about how we can extract data from Revit, but we can use the information in Excel to do some really cool things with formulas. So here's an example, a little video that shows the information. You'll see here the view list. There's the title on sheet, right? So we have the view name to the left, that's A, but we want the title on sheet to be, whether it's north, south, east, or west, and we actually want the room name that it's in as well. So how do we do that very easily? Well, in fact, again, we have another sample. If we come down here to our architectural links, we have Views Interior Audit. And here you can see, again, the properties that we select are things like, the family and type, the detail number, the elevation room name, and elevation room number, and so forth. And again, I can filter on this information and decide exactly, like I only want the elevation. So in this case, we're going to say where the family and type equals, an elevation, interior. So we'll set that. So we know we're only getting the information for those interior elevations. So now when I export it to Excel, right, we're going to see basically a very similar list as you saw there in the schedule, right? So we have, the elevation room name, we have the title on sheet, and the view name. But one thing that's really interesting is we export a new parameter called orientation. So when in Excel, I'm going to say, okay, the orientation is either 0, 90, 180. So we can figure out, based on the view reference, right, the little view marker that you have, that when you set the elevation and you place that elevation marker within an interior room, that you can specify, or you can extract whether that marker is north, south, east, or west, again, based on the information within the project, what you've set for the project north elevation within the project. So in this case, there's a little formula. It's using the if-then statement. So we've selected an if-then statement that says if it's this value, then it's north. If it's this value, then it's west. If it's this other value, then it's south. So we've automatically now been able to determine, based on the view reference marker, whether the orientation. So now we're going to use, again, some Excel magic, and we're going to say, okay, I want to have it, the actual, the word or the letters RM, and then that ampersand means and add or concatenate, put that together with information in column F, which is the room number, right? And then we put that together with also the room name, which is column E, right? And then finally, we're going to have a dash and say it's, INT for interior elevation. So the RM is like what we want at the beginning, and then the INT elevation is what we want at the end. And then we also want that M value, which is northwest, southeast. So there was a nice little formula that basically now concatenated all those things together: the room numbers, the room names, the orientation, and that has been filled out. So now that you have all that information, in that formula, right? Now we're going to save the Excel spreadsheet, and we're going to import that information back into Revit using Ideate BIMLink. So here we're back in Revit. We're going to select our import, and we're going to select the Views Interior Audit. So now when I import that information, you'll see that in our schedule that I have in the background there, which shows the view list, the title on sheet, which is column B, is all going to be filled out automatically based on the view orientation and so forth. So now when I say import and close that, you'll see that now we've got room, whatever the room number is, whatever the room name was, and then the orientation, whether it's north, south, east, or west. So, it's a great example of how you can use the power of Excel to kind of combine these fields together to do a formula, like, a fairly complex formula based on, again, the orientation and so forth, allowing that to be then imported and the data then to be updated within Revit. So what we covered today is we used Ideate BIMLink to edit vast quantities of information. So you think about, again, changing the room names from lowercase to uppercase, or being able to modify, assign the correct view template to 500 views. That would be very difficult in doing it manually within Revit. But with Ideate BIMLink, you can do it in a matter of seconds. And so you can actually create new items too. That I showed you that you can create new rooms, sheets, but there are many other elements that can be created as well through the import of Ideate BIMLink. We can do, I showed you an example of a quantity takeoff where we could do a multi-category export and send out all that information and then sort of massage the data with a nice little summary sheet or a pivot table in Excel. And then the next couple items are basically, when I showed you the family names, being able to rename items, also the elevation names, doing all those kind of cool magic formulas in Excel, and then importing the data back into Revit. And then, of course, another example that people are using is our spell check, or using Ideate BIMLink to export to Excel, do a quick spell check, and then import the information back in. So, again, these are just a few. I have some other examples that I sometimes show with MEP where we've got like device elevations, like all of the sockets basically are at a particular elevation and maybe they're wrong. So you can send it out to Excel, you can update the elevation or the device elevations to the correct information, maybe 100 or 500 of them very easily, import that, and now they're changed within the project. So the key thing to remember is that when you change things in Excel and you import, it's actually changing both the data and potentially the graphics on the Revit side. So for instance, like I said, if you change the device elevation, right, from 3 feet to 4 feet, when you look at an elevation view, those new sockets are going to be at 4 feet. Because that's the way Revit works. All the data is tied together, whether the graphical data, plan, section, elevation, as well as the sort of the parameter data about those particular objects. So really, the possibilities are endless, the kinds of things that you can manipulate with Ideate BIMLink. So I wanted to sort of reiterate that everything you've seen today is available on Revit 2015, Revit 2016, and Revit 2017. So we maintain sort of, I'll call it backwards compatibility. If we create a new version of, in this case, like our last shipping version was April of 2016, we actually update we update the 2017 Revit, we update the 2016 and 2015. And we actually have our earlier releases too. We have BIMLink for 2013 and BIMLink for 2014, but we're only making the latest and greatest updates to the last 3 releases. So it's anticipated, based on past experience, that there will be a new Revit release coming up here in a couple months. And so we'll have a version of Ideate BIMLink that runs on that as well. And then we will maintain, of course, our compatibility or updates with 2016 and 2017. So Ideate BIMLink, as well as all of our other solutions, are available as a standalone license. So you can, it's tied to the machine, or you can have a network license that is a floating license. The nice thing about the network license is, for instance, if you purchase Revit 2017 today, it actually gives you access to Revit 2015 and Revit 2016 as well. So you can have multiple versions support. We support Revit deployment the same way that we have the MSI files, the same way that Autodesk works. And then I wanted to highlight the fact that when I go back to Revit here and I select on Ideate BIMLink, or again any one of our solutions, I can come over here to the help. We have real product help. So for instance, the user interface overview, it's going to give me information about that. But then if I want to, how do I do something, like how do I audit view names, this is going to go link out to our online help, which we keep updated. And so you can now go directly to the online help and see, how would you audit interior elevation names? That was what I was showing you there, one of the examples. So you can see there's a lot of things here, utilize type swapping, construction tasks that you can click on, and you can see more information about that. Create a quantity takeoff, right? That's another example that we showed. So if you want to learn a little bit more about how you would actually do a quantity takeoff, where the link would be found, you can go through our help. So again, we've done a lot of work making sure that our help is really robust. And then, like I said, multiple version support and a lot of quality testing for all of our solutions, whether it's BIMLink, Explorer, Sticky, or Ideate apps. So with that, I'm about at the end of the presentation. I wanted to make sure that there was some time for wrap-up. Any more information, you can always go to ideatesoftware.com, or I would encourage you to go to microsolresources.com/products/vendor and then Ideate. And they have a wealth of information about, like as we talked about at the top of the hour, Harry had mentioned, different videos and information about the different solutions from Ideate software.